Hey friends, I'm Remington. Welcome. So I'm back in the greenhouse once again, and today I wanted to talk about my reading goals for 2025. Obviously, it's a little late to be talking about this because it's February 2nd as I'm filming this, but better late than never. I've already kind of been implementing these goals into what I've been reading so far this year. But yeah, I just wanted to get these out there and let y'all know kind of how I'm structuring my reading this year. My goal for books read is 25, and that's pretty low for me. Last year I read like 38, and the year before that was 53, and both of those years had a month or two where I barely read at all. So I think I should pretty comfortably be able to hit 25, even though I'll be starting college in the fall, which will definitely slow me down. I'll still easily be able to hit that goal. And with that, like 10,000 pages is my pages goal, both of which should not be a problem, and I'm already blowing past them. But with that goal, even though that's like the total goal for books read, I have a lot of other smaller goals that if you add them all up, it'll add to more than 25 books, I think. Oh yeah, it'll add up. Well, not necessarily, because some of them can overlap. But for the most part, if I finish all my smaller goals, I will almost certainly be reading more than 25 books. But it's okay if I miss some of these smaller goals, because they're kind of just there to guide my reading, not necessarily to dictate what I'm reading, you know. The first one that I wrote down is read 5 books from non-white authors. This is something I did okay with last year, and the year before that, 2023, did abysmally. In 2023, basically, it was straight white men. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. I just want to make a point to diversify the viewpoints that I'm reading from. So in 2024, I made a little bit more of a conscious effort to steer away from just straight white men, even though that was probably still a vast majority. I don't know vast, but like it was definitely a majority. Honestly, with what I am interested in reading right now, it's not even going to be particularly difficult. Like just reading what I naturally am interested in right now is going to get me to where I want to be with that goal anyway. So that should be pretty easy to achieve. I also want to read 5 books by women, and that's also going to be something that's just very easy to achieve, and I'm already at 2 for this one. I'm at 1 for non-white authors and 2 for by women. With what I'm reading, a lot of those non-white authors and women are going to overlap anyway. Like I'm reading Women Racing Class by Angela Davis right now, so that's a point for both when I finish it. And even though like these are my goals, I'm not setting these goals just to like say that I'm reading diversely. It's because these different viewpoints are really important to me as I try and pin down exactly what I believe in and what I'm interested in, and like try and get a broader sense of perspective on the world in general. Also partially just because these are the kind of authors that I want to be supporting going forward. Of course, there's nothing wrong with reading books by like a straight white man. I'm a straight white man, so I got no problem with that. But I do want to be conscious of expanding my horizons a little bit. And with that, I also want to read 3 books by LGBT plus authors. This one, I don't know exactly how I'm gonna hit this one. There's one book back here that I'll talk about in a minute that I'll probably get to. And then there's a graphic novel, Heartstoppers, which I've ordered because I'd been interested in that one for a while. Other than that, I'm not exactly sure what else I'll be reading in this category. And then another one is 5 classics. Reading the classics is important to me because, one, so far I've just had a really good experience reading them. You know, for the most part, there's reasons why they're classics. And part of that reason is just that they're really well-written books for the most part. I also want to be able to just pick up on more references as I'm reading different things. Like, whenever I'm able to pick up on one of those in something I'm reading, it just, you know, it feels like a little Easter egg that was placed there for me, and I love it. You know, I also just want to be a more well-read and educated individual in general, and reading classics is a pretty good way to go about that. This one's not as important, but I do want to read 3 books from the same author. As much as I want to read broadly, I also want to read deeply and get really invested in one or a few authors' works. And that's probably going to be Brandon Sanderson this year, since I'm reading the Mistborn trilogy right now. Yeah, other than that, I don't really have authors that I'm reading more than 1 book from this year. that I have planned, at least. We'll see how that ends up. I also want to read 3 science books. Probably more specifically biology, since that's what I'm going to be majoring in the fall. I have one behind me that I'm planning on reading before I start, and then I'm sure that I'll, be reading stuff as I'm going through the courses as well. I also want to read 5 political and or philosophical books. That's something that I've been meaning to do for a while, and I kind of did it last year, even though it was a lot more politics heavy than philosophy heavy. I want to kind of try and even it out a little bit this year. But just like philosophy, I love it. Super interesting. It just takes me forever to get through because you really got to take your time and really sit with the ideas and really try and understand them in ways that is harder and more time consuming than with a lot of other genres of books. But I think that devoting that time to philosophy is going to be really good for me and really impactful on the way that I view the world, because I try to be pretty logical and rational, but I don't have a super solid education to lay that base on. So I kind of need to build that up going forward. And of course, it's always just a good idea to continually be seeking knowledge. And then the last one that I have written down here is I want to read 5 books from new countries. Like I said, diversity in my reading is something that's really important to me. And reading from different places in the world is a very good way to go about that, I think. For the most part, what I've read, and I plan on doing probably my next video about this, maybe like 2 videos from now about this. I just bought a map and I'm going to be putting pins based off of how many books per country that I've read, and I'll probably do by state too, because, I'm an American and most of what I read is North American books, specifically from the USA. Putting together that map is going to be a fun little treat for me, I think, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting. But overall, I don't remember exactly how many, but I think there's like 8 or 9 countries that I've read books from in the last 3 years, which is as much as I've been reading seriously. I read as a kid too, but I doubt that any of that was outside of either North America or Britain. Definitely excited to do that. I think I only have one behind me that's from a new country, so I don't know exactly how that's going to work out, because I can only think of one other book that I own that I haven't read yet from a country that I haven't read a book from yet, and that's Nelson Mandela's biography, The Long Walk to Freedom, I think. And that's a chunker that I just don't know if I'm gonna get to this year. Those are my basic goals that I'm kind of using to guide my reading. And I have some books about here that I'm gonna get to in just a second that, for the most part, I plan on reading. I'd be happy if I got to 50% of these. I'm definitely a mood reader, so I'm not gonna say that I'm gonna read all of these, especially since there's more than 25 here, and I've already read a few. So if I read 50% of these, I'll be happy. But I'm sure that there are going to be books that I don't have back here that I just pick up or just decide to be interested in later the year as what I'm interested in shifts. Also, there's a few books that I ordered pretty recently from thrift books that I plan on reading that aren't back here. So I'm not going to be including those right now, but maybe you'll see them in the near future. Anyway, let's get into some of the books that I'm going to be reading. Probably. Oh god, let's not drop them. We're going to start with sci-fi. Sci-fi is probably my favorite genre. I like fantasy a lot too, but I think sci-fi just captures a unique spirit because it often incorporates philosophy as well and analyzes topics a lot more deeply than I find in a lot of other books. First one I have here, and these are in no particular order, is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Last year I read The Lathe of Heaven by Le Guin. It was very interesting, and it really inspired me to want to read a lot more from her. And I hear that this is one of her best, so I'm very strongly looking forward to this one. And then again by Le Guin, we have The Wind's 12 Quarters, which is a bunch of short stories by her. I want to read a lot more short stories this year too. Well, not necessarily a lot, but I have 2 short story collections that I want to read this year because I slowly want to get more into writing, and I think that writing short stories will be a very approachable way for me to do that, but I just haven't read a lot of short stories, and I think it's good if you want to try and do something to try and, take in a lot of what other people have done in that same subgenre. Like, obviously I read a lot of books, but even though I read, books that are under 300 pages a lot, I don't read like books that are, or not books, but like stories that are self-contained in like 30 to 50 pages. So that's something that I want to try and be more intentional about this year as I slowly build up the habit of writing more. The other short story collection that I have is Exhalation by Ted Chiang. I don't know a lot about this one, but I have seen it recommended by a few other people on here. And I found that one at a thrift store for a couple bucks, so of course I was going to pick it up. Originally, I did think it was a nonfiction book, though. I didn't look too closely at it when I bought it. But yeah, I've heard good things about it, so I'm excited for it. Then we also have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which I've heard is just a cozy sci-fi adventure. I don't want to be reading too much cozy stuff. It's not exactly the vibe I'm going for with what I'm trying to do with my reading. I want to, be more purposeful about educating myself and gaining more perspective like I've been talking about for this entire video. But I do want to read some of this stuff because sometimes it's just good to sit down with a cozy book that you're just going to enjoy and not worry about fulfilling quotas, I guess. Even though this Becky Chambers is, as far as I know, part of the LGBTQ community, so that is one of the authors for that statistic that I'm going for, I guess. Yeah, I'm excited for it. It's part of a series, so if I like that one, which I've heard very good things about it, so I expect to, then I'll probably just continue. I think there's 2 in the series, there might be 3, I'm not exactly sure, but we'll cross that bridge if and when we get there. Then there's also Kindred by Octavia Butler. I've just been hearing so many good things about Octavia Butler recently. I'm really excited to dive into her work. Like, I'm going to read this one first, and if I like this one, I'm going to go not straight into, but probably pretty soon after it, Parable of the Sower, and then after that, Parable of the Talents, I think is the follow-up to that one. I just heard that it's very good sci-fi with very applicable topics. But that's it as far as the sci-fi. Next, I'll do fantasy, which this year I already read the first Mistborn book. That's probably my review or summary of my experience with it is probably going to be the next video I make. But with that, I plan to read the other 2 books in the Mistborn trilogy, The Wells of Ascension and The Hero of Ages. Really enjoyed the first book, and I'm really excited to get to these, even though they're pretty freaking long. And I've heard some mixed things about the third one, so I don't know how that's going to turn out. But even if it's almost as good as the first Mistborn, I'll be happy, because the first Mistborn was really good, and I really enjoyed it. And the last fantasy is Babel or Babel from R.F. Kuang. This one has just been all over, constantly hearing good things about it. And I'm excited to read R.F. Kuang for the first time. I haven't read anything by her yet, even though I do have The Poppy War. I've had it for a while. It's just not something that I've gotten around to. It's a pretty short book, so I would have read it by now, except for the fact that it's part of a trilogy. And, I'm already in a couple series, so I'm not really trying to start another one right now. So this standalone, even though it's, a little bit bigger than The Poppy War, is, I think, a good starting place. Then we have our lit fic, and I'll just talk about this one first. I don't know exactly. I think this falls into thriller category. I don't think it's horror. The Stand by Stephen King. This is my tome that I'm going to read this year, which is one that I forgot to talk about earlier. One of my goals is to read a book that is over 1,000 pages long. And this one's 1150. So yeah, it definitely falls into that category. Heard a lot of really good things about this one, about how it's a group of people surviving after apocalypse and kind of making a community out of it. I don't know too much more than that because I intentionally try to avoid spoilers for books, even plot summaries. But yeah, really excited to get to this one. I've liked all of what I've read by Stephen King before. I'm really hoping that he doesn't let me down with this chunker of a book. Next up, we have Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Again, I've heard a lot of really good things about this one. And I wanted to read some lit fic this year, because it's not really a category that I'm super heavily drawn to. This is not one of my more anticipated books this year. I'm much more drawn to sci-fi and fantasy, or nonfiction and classics as well. But I don't want to completely neglect the genre of literary fiction. The other literary fiction I have is The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. Again, I've just heard that this is a modern classic, and Hosseini is Afghani, and I'm pretty sure I haven't read a book from Afghanistan yet, so that'll be another country that I've read from. Then over here, well, let's do classics first, actually. First of all, I'll do the books that I'm going to read in October, which you can probably guess from the classics. Well, one of them at least. Gonna finally read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I've read a little bit of it, not last year, I think in 2023, and liked it, but just didn't get super into it, and then I stopped. So I'm excited to actually read it, because it's one of those books that I hear nothing negative about and only glowing reviews. So I'm excited for that. And then going along with that, we have Gothic Tales by Mary Shelley, which very tiny. So I'm expecting just like a couple short stories from her. And I'll read both of these in October for spooky times, of course. Then we also have my yearly quota of Shakespeare. This time we're going to read Hamlet. I hear that this is his best work, and I've been pretty happy with the two that I've read from him so far, Julius Caesar and Romeo and Juliet. So if this is even better than those, I'm going to be pretty happy with it. Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Another one of the super popular classics that everyone seems to love. I just started my first Russian literature book, which is The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. And there's a few other short stories by him in that book. I read the first one already, Family Happiness, and it was pretty good. But yeah, Russian literature is definitely a subgenre that I want to get a lot more into, just because, you know, everybody hypes it up so much. And this is like the book, I think. This and like War and Peace, or Anna Karenina maybe. So really excited to get to this, even though from what I've heard, it's probably going to be a little bit more of a difficult read. I hear that it like flows pretty well, but it's just like, it's one that you have to spend more time with. Then we also have The Handmaid's Tale, and this is going to be my third attempt at reading it. Every time I've tried, I've really enjoyed what I've read, but just stopped for whatever reason. The writing's really good, the story's really interesting, and I'm going to love it. I already know that I'm going to love it based off of what I've read of it, but I just need to actually be in the right space to get through it this time. I've also got Beloved by Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison, especially lately, I've just been hearing so much praise for. I've heard that this is a really sad book. I know nothing about it other than that, you know, Toni Morrison often writes very touching, emotionally gripping stories. Going into it mostly blind, but expecting to be a little sad at the end. Then Fahrenheit 451. This is one that I've been putting off for a long time. I tried to read it, I think in 2023. And just bounced off really hard for some reason. It's one of those classics that I feel like I need to read. Like, obviously, there's not a list of books that you need to read to be considered a good reader or well-read, or, you know, there's not a valid list of books to read. But if there were, this one would be on it, so. And I've only read one other book by Ray Bradbury, which was The Martian Chronicles, and I liked that a lot. So hopefully, now that I have kind of a different perspective towards reading, I won't find it as egregious as I did the first time. Then the one science book that I have on here is Why Evolution is True. I have a pretty lacking education in biology. Like, I've been doing my own, like, education on it the past couple of years. Like, I read The Selfish Gene. I've watched Crash Course Biology. I had a pretty not great education. I was homeschooled and also just a really bad student. So kind of my fault, kind of not. But since I want to be a biology major, I should really, you know, brush up a little bit on the kind of stuff that that I'm going to be learning, because I know like the broad principles, but when it comes to the nitty gritty, I'm not very well versed in it. Then we have the philosophy that I'm going to be reading. Man's Search for Meaning. Yes, I don't know why that felt very wrong when I said it, but Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. Just one that, again, I hear nothing but praise from. This is about a guy who found hope while he was in the Nazi concentration camps, and that is such a powerful thing. And again, I hear nothing but praise for it, and it's pretty short. So I'm very excited to get through this one and to see what it has in store for me. We have Marcus Aurelius. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This is a super popular one. You know, it often gets recommended as like a man book, which is not a genre of book that I am particularly interested in. The whole self-help scene is just kind of grating to me, and I'm not interested in it. This is a legitimate philosophical classic, and as someone who wants to get more experience with philosophy, you know, this is one that eventually I have to read anyway, so why not start now? We also have Outgrowing God by Richard Dawkins. I have this one as well as The God Delusion, and I haven't read either of them yet, so I'm going to start with this one because this is more of like a beginner level one. Like, it's more geared towards young people, teens specifically, I think. And then The God Delusion, it's older as well as, you know, targeted at a more mature audience as well. So we'll see how I feel about this one and then go into that one probably. Then we also have On Liberty and Other Essays by John Stuart Mill. This is, I already know, this is going to be a hard one to get through. It's not like that thick, it's a little thick, but it being philosophy, that just means it's going to take me forever. But On Liberty is an essay that I've been really eager to read for quite a while now. Just with everything that I see going on in the world and the push and pull, I just think it'll really help me to better understand things and to, you know, be a little bit more prescriptive about what's going on in the world. And I've read a little bit of it already, like just a couple pages, and I was already like, this is good stuff. I don't remember what the other essays are about, but I'm pretty sure I'll read those as well throughout the year. Maybe not like immediately after On Liberty, but I do intend to get through the entire thing this year. And that's going to be a challenge, but I think it's going to be really good for me. Then the last category we have is all politics related stuff. So if you're not interested in that, you know, I totally understand, and you are welcome to click off now if you'd like. The first one that I want to talk about is Case Against Socialism by Rand Paul. I'm pretty freaking left-leaning, but I think it would be remiss of me to completely ignore the other side. I don't want to end up in an echo chamber, just agreeing with my own ideas or with people who I respect. I want to take in other viewpoints and evaluate them critically, because, you know, I like to say that I've arrived to where I am based off of sound logic and reason, but you know, if I'm not taking in stuff from the other side, how do I know if that's true or not? Going forward, it's definitely going to be a minority. Well, not definitely. It's probably going to be a minority because there's bigger priorities for me, but I do think that I need a couple of those in my life. You know, I need a little bit of pushback on whatever it is I'm learning about. I need to look at the other side at least a little bit. Then we also have Except for Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics by Mark Lamont Hill and Mitchell Piltnick. The Palestinian conflict is really important to me, and I think people are finally kind of waking up to it, at least on the left, but just in general, it's heartbreaking to me that we've let it get to the extent that it's gotten to. And I want to be a lot more knowledgeable about the history in the conflict, which is why I want to reread The 100 Years' War in Palestine by Reading Goals. I read this one last year, but this year I want to take my time with it a little bit more and really write fairly cohesive notes as well as tab it, just so I can have quick reference to different events throughout Palestinian history, because I have a very bad memory. And although I can, sum up the book and I remember a good chunk of it, there's just so much that is fuzzy to me because, I'm bad at remembering facts. So I gotta make sure that I'm writing things down and taking good notes that I can reference back to the book if I really want to be able to, review what I've read. And just with all the nonfiction books, as well as maybe even some of the classics, I want to be tabbing them all and taking notes like that. I've been doing that with women racing class so far, and I think it's going to be really beneficial for me. And we've got Homage to Catalonia by, oh gosh, what's his name? 1984 guy. Not Oscar Wilde. George Orwell. I don't know how I forgot that. George Orwell. This is about his personal life serving in the Spanish Civil War. He went there as a journalist, but ended up joining the fight. Basically, it's just his story of him fighting against fascism. And I think that hopefully will not be as apt as I think it's going to be in the coming months and years. Enough said about that. We don't need to get doom and gloom. We've also got On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. This is one that I have seen recommended so much lately. It's just a bunch of points about observations from the 20th century about how authoritarian regimes took power and took control of populations. And just a lot of things to be weary of. And again, I think that unfortunately this is going to be a necessary read in the coming years. I hope that I'm wrong. I really do. I hope that I'm just, giving into doomerism a little more. I hope that I'm proven wrong, but I think that this is going to be important. And even if it's not important to our day-to-day lives, it's still very good knowledge to be aware of. Lastly, Mutual Aid by Dean Spade. This one is all about just taking care of your community around you. It's often put in a very political lens, but it doesn't even need to be, because you should just be taking care of the people around you. You should just be meeting people's needs if you're able to. Getting involved with community is something that's really important to me, because I've been very, very bad at it, and I've based off of my circumstances, I haven't really had many opportunities to be a part of communities of more than just a few people, and I want to change that. I want to be part of something bigger than myself. So hoping that this book will help me with that a little bit, even though the main thing I got to do with that is just plug myself into the community. I'll have to get my nose out of a book for that, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm hoping that by the end of the year I will have read 50% of these. If I read less than that, I'll be pretty disappointed. But yeah, I might not hit all of the goals that I set out for myself, but I hope that I hit at least a few of them. And I'm pretty confident that I can at very least hit half of them. But yeah, that's kind of my goal for going into 2025, even though we're 1/12 of the way through already. So I'm looking forward to reading, to making videos about what I'm reading, and to talking to people about books. I'm enjoying being back on here, so hopefully I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.